Hey guys, you're listening to the Bitter and Basic podcast with Katie
and Alex, where we discuss being in an in-between generation.
Okay. Hey guys, it's Katie.
And it's Alex.
Welcome back to the Bitter and Basic podcast, discussing the ins and outs of being an adult of an in-between generation. Today we're going to be analyzing how the current state of the world and society is impacting the two youngest generations, as well as their impact on the world today. Alex, how would you say that you have impacted society?
I would say, me, as just one singular person, haven't really done much. But I think our generation and, people who are about to, really get into, especially, a lot of people who are in the tech field are a lot of young people, too. Probably around our age.
For sure.
So I think they are having, the biggest impact on how, electronic communications is going, and then also just social media in general. And I think that's pretty cool.
No, definitely. It's crazy to see kind of how things have changed a little bit. So maybe we haven't had that huge impact on society, but it's had kind of an impact on us. And then in turn, we're kind of changing it. It's kind of like a back and forth type of thing. So I think with how things have changed, like with the tech field and stuff, people who are in our position, like going to school and learning and starting their career fields, are able to take advantage of this new stuff that people aren't in the position to learn about, as it's coming out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that even in the past 50 years, so much has changed. Technology in general just has skyrocketed. And then even in the past 15 years, it's just gotten so much better. And then also worse.
Well, I'm excited to dive in today. We are here with Kimmelette Ross, a graduate student in counseling psychology at Texas Tech. And we're going to talk more about how society impacts the in-between generation and how we impact the world in turn. So welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
No, of course. So my first question would be, what can you tell us about the changes in society over the last roughly 50 years, I guess, as we were talking, in regards to the generations? So
I don't know. I guess I just think about my parents' generation, for example, and their parents versus us now. And I think there's been tons of changes. There's been social media changes, technology, the phones. We're on with iPhone 10s and we have video chats to where at a certain point they were sending emails and they had the big box phones. I just think about schooling wise. Now we have programs that we can do mathematics on to where our parents were doing long division by hand. So I think it's been tons of changes that really I don't think you think about unless you actually are in a part of those changes. Unless your parents talk to you about, well, in my day I did this. Or even for me in the psychological field, learning about different theories and just to where sometimes you had to give an assessment or analyze something by hand and now we just plug things into a computer. So I think the learning is the most different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you brought up a really crazy thing about how we're on iPhone 11. I think if you think about the time, the Motorola Razr was the phone. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I just saw that on a movie. I was I remember when I had a Razr. I was a freshman in high school, I think.
And now I think we're past a whole decade of iPhones. I think we're about to go into, I think the second decade starts in 2024, which is not that far away if you think about it now.
Insane.
You know what I'm saying? So technology, I guess, even as we were talking before this, it's just crazy how much further we've gotten. And the fact that you can do so much on your phone. You can even, how you're saying, you can do mathematics just on your phone. And then I think you can even take a picture of it and it'll do it for you.
I remember back when I was asking my parents, could I do LimeWire or Napster so I could download music onto my the little iPod shuffles and stuff we had, and you're worried about getting a virus. So where now you're just listening to iTunes or Spotify and just pay $4 a month for a student membership, and you don't even need to download music anymore.
Oh, for sure.
I was thinking, just how far, phones have came, my mom, one of her favorite movies is 16 Candles, and there's the car phone in that movie, and it's a good movie, and it's kind of standing the test of time a little bit, but just little things like that when you're the phone in a bag in your car, people are stuff like that's kind of weird. And then now we're talking about generations of iPhones, and the Razr. Did y'all see where it's coming out with a new version where they just launched a phone where it's a flip phone?
It's still a flip phone, but it's a full screen flip phone. I thought that was crazy.
I think it's so cool. I love that it's kind of coming back around. I think that that's so smart of them. Like they could so do something like that. People are looking for something like classic and different, like a flip phone that's also like innovative and new. Like that's so smart.
And I think the fact that that Razor name is such a staple in like just growing up in general. Like I think on Twitter I saw everybody were just like, oh, I want it. And I think right now like it's still like a $2,000 phone if you wanted to get it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not out, but still like the fact that people are gonna want to get it just because it's that Razor phone and it flips
Vintage.
and it,
Yeah.
kind of throwing it back a little bit.
Oh yeah.
For sure, playing off people's nostalgia, for sure.
All right, I guess our next question is going to be, what type of impact does society have on millennials and Gen Zers?
I guess it just depends on how you're looking at society. Are you looking at the generation before us and the impact they have on us, or what's going on right now? Because if you think about it, a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, we are like, fight for our rights. We deserve to have this, to where the generation before us, they paved the way for us, but it wasn't as outward. It wasn't as something that everyone just did. You didn't have these expectations or conditions of where you do something. Now it's we expect to have fair and equal rights. We expect to be able to have any type of job we would want. So I feel like it's helped us in a way, but I also think it's kind of sabotaged us in a way because we are very confident as generations. We are willing to do whatever it takes. And I think at times we sometimes lose respect for some things along the way.
Oh yeah, and I think there's like a generational like standards that people have. Like my parents, you have to do this a certain way and it has to be done this way, which I mean, there's a lot of ways to do a lot of things. And I think that you shouldn't always have to do it the way other people think you should do it. And I know I don't. I literally like going against the grain, so to speak.
I like to call it, I like to go rogue. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, it's not just one way to do something. And I think that's really hard, especially explaining to your parents. Like, for example, my mama asked, well, how do I do this? I'm like, well, you do it this way. And she's like, but that's a shortcut. I need to know how to do it. And I'm like, well, this is the easy way to do it. And you can see your parents get frustrated, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Just show me. And we're like, it's not that hard, but it is hard because it's new. And I think for us, we are in that mindset of you can do anything. It's not that hard, to where it is hard for some people, even people in our generation. We've just been taught to not accept failure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think failure is like one of the biggest things that we try to, like, we all do it. You know what I'm saying? I think we all fail at some point in time, but we don't like to admit to it. And I think like my parents, they'll admit to it and then they'll work harder. And I think sometimes like in our generation, if we fail, we don't want to admit to it. And then we'll also like seek down into like a deeper hole of like, why did I do this? Instead of trying to make ourselves like fight a little bit harder. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's the hardest part. Like my parents always raised me to know like everybody fails at something. It doesn't mean you have to give up, but you should also have like an alternate way and a plan of doing things. And I think having like parents who believe that have been helpful, and have parents who instill their generational beliefs on you. But I think for the people who are more into the Gen Z part of it than the millennial part of it, it's hard because teachers and parents are changing their ways now too because of society. So now you're taught to, you may fail, but you shouldn't fail because you have all these opportunities. You have social media, technology. You have so much more help than you did back in 2 or 3 generations ago.
For sure.
Definitely. I think that can be transferred also into a form of like pressure. You know what I mean? I feel like because you are so aware of what everyone else is doing, you know that like, oh, I have my extracurriculars, you know, in high school. You think that you're kind of checking all your boxes, but you know, like just from what you see that there's people are doing so much more. You know what I mean? It's almost like I'm not doing enough. I need to be on TikTok and on Instagram and doing all these things that, you know, are kind of made up, you know, but you feel like you need to be out there and like doing so much more because everyone is kind of like putting all of themselves out there, you know?
I agree with that 100%. It almost feels like you have to be doing something, because if you're doing nothing, it's not an excuse, because people are finding a way, any way to make money. They have YouTube, they have TikTok, Instagram. People are making millions, more than we'll probably see in a lifetime, depending on the job we're in. People are doing therapy online, on the computer. So it's so much that you can do. It's really hard when you don't do something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of crazy because it's while we're kind of getting these standards from our parents or the other generations, they're also kind of changing their standards to how society is changing. Like my dad, for instance, is like an old business owner, and he needs someone to run his social media accounts, and he thinks that because I'm a young person, I can just do it. And I'm like, well, you should probably like invest into someone who can do this for you. But he doesn't think that that's like a job, but yet he needs someone, so I'm like, you can't have your foot in both doors. You have to kind of like agree that this is like a necessary like quality that you want, or you don't think that you need it and try to do it without it. It's kind of just like, it's this weird maneuvering in between.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect saying.
Exactly. Okay, so according to Pew Research, millennials are now the second largest generation with the ability to vote, with boomers being the first. How do you think this is impacting our world today?
Well, I think the first thing is we're not into politics for the right reasons at times. Like the boomers, their generation, they look at how the politician affects the environment, how they affect their jobs, how they affect certain rights, to where our generations, we look at different things like, are they LGBT friendly? Have they said something racist in the past? Are they sexist? Now they have the Me Too movement. Are they a part of that? So I feel like we go off of what our parents believe at times. So instead of getting all the facts, we look at what's put out in the media versus looking at what this person's really trying to do or what they have done in the past.
No, I totally agree. I think even me, like, I couldn't tell you if I'm like Democratic or like Republican Party like centric, just because of the fact that I kind of do go like look at what people have done and what they say versus what my dad's really into what their policies are, like what are they going to help the economy, or what are they going to help with like health benefits and stuff like that. And I think sometimes, like, when you just go look straight at their policies, yeah, they're good, but does every president always go fight for those policies, or is it just something that they want to get elected for, and then maybe they'll do it? You know what I'm saying?
I think like the Obama election was the biggest thing. Like, I'm not gonna lie, so many of us voted for him because he was black. We would have and he did good things. Like, he had good reasons, but since we all, like white, black people, other ethnicities, we all wanted to see that black president. And he got, I feel like, torn down a lot because of things he couldn't fix. But we didn't look at that it was already broken for 8 years before that. And I think Trump's another big thing. Like, I didn't vote in the last election. And it's just like, for me, it was like I didn't know enough about Hillary. And I just heard like my dad say, like, listen, Hillary's not great. And I'm like, well, why? I don't know, because I didn't take the time to look. But you also hear about all the things Trump does and says. And so I think that's like the biggest difference. We're looking at what we see face value or what we can be empowered for. I think the Obama election, it was all about empowerment. It's about what has not happened before. I think the elections that are going to come up now is going to be about empowerment. I think it's going to be, we want a woman president. We want a president of a different ethnicity. Or like for one of the candidates, he's gay. We want to see that. And so I think for us, it's we want to change what the past never allowed us to have. And for the boomers, they're like, okay, that's great, but we also need to look at healthcare. We need to look at schooling. We need to look at the people who are trying to forgive loans, not take away loans. So I think after you vote, you see that. And you're like, well, we got who we wanted, but we don't know if we actually help society.
Well, I see that like right now with like the whole Trump election and whatnot, just because of the fact that, yes, his economic policies are awesome. Like the way he's making like the world, like I guess America, just have like a turnover new leaf when it comes to like people who can make money and stuff like that. But then also his foreign policies and what he's done just with Russia and everything else. I mean, I think it's kind of just put us in like a dark place also.
Yeah.
And it's so dumb. I just think I'm not going to get into this right now.
Well, I think it's really interesting with the Obama presidency election situation thing, because he was the first president or candidate, whatever, that he utilized social media, and I thought that was really interesting. And how you were saying face value, I think that, I don't know anything as far as like paperwork when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
Like, I really judge people on face value and stuff. And I think that if you compare someone who is like as eloquent as Obama, like he was just hard. He was like, the way he spoke, and like he was just like, he felt safe.
He could win over anyone.
Oh,
you see him now and you're like, man, I wish people wanted his wife to run just because it was him.
Well, and them together were so like wholesome and genuine, and you can just tell that they were like just trying to do the right thing. You know what I mean? That was like their whole vibe. You know, they were just like, someone needs to do this, and it's gonna be us. And we're like, everyone. I think everyone, no matter what kind of you felt politically, I think that at the end of the day, I think that you knew that this dude like had your back. You know,
and
for
I think
them.
That's the biggest part. It's just like if Oprah ran, I 100% guarantee you she would win the election.
Yeah.
Not because of anything she said for her election, it's for all the things she's done in the past. And because she is Oprah and she's done all this stuff to help people. And I think that's like the hardest thing is that are we helping by empowering these people who wouldn't have got a chance before? Or are we hindering the voting in a way because we only take things for face value? And that's not to say every person who's a millennial does, but a lot of us do.
I think the majority does, honestly.
I'm guilty of it.
I mean, people will read a headline without reading the whole story and be like, this is what happened.
Yep.
Instead of reading it and then they go more into detail. And then you realize, oh, this is actually what happened, because I'm guilty of that a lot.
Fake news. But yeah, I mean, like, that's not a false thing. You know, fake news is real. And it's crazy because stuff like that really is like what gets you.
All right, so the next question is going to be, in today's world, it seems like millennials and boomers are constantly at a juxtaposition on societal issues. Why is this, you think?
Different beliefs. There's different things that the boomers had to live by and go by to survive and make it. And millennials, we have a little bit more freedom. I feel like, for example, people in the LGBT community, now you're seeing more people in those higher level positions and not having to hide who they are. Back in the boomers' time, you had to hide that because you were getting discriminated against. You're still getting discriminated against now, but people are more likely to fight for you than they would have back in the boomers' time. So I feel like we're always fighting. We're always like my way or your way because they didn't have it as easy. And not gonna lie, we do have it easier. It's like the whole big supermodel debate where the big supermodels were like, we are supermodels. We were famous when there weren't social media and technology to get us out there. We had to go to casting calls. We had to be on magazines. They had to work their butts off to be able to be successful. But now you just post a picture. You can be 14 years old and be famous for a picture you posted on Instagram or Facebook. So I feel like it's just, they paved the way for us and the innovators did. And so I just feel like we have it slightly easier. And so I think that's the reason, because we see it that way and we see like things should be this way because we're allowed to have our opinions, to where for them, they didn't get that opportunity as much. And so they're still a little bit more respectful with the way they do things. And I think for us, we're more like, what's right is right. So you need to do it a certain way to be right.
For sure. We kind of almost like expect it. And I think that they are, the previous generations or the people that paved the way were used to things being harder, expected, you know, to put in work and not have these opportunities, you know, that they had to go find the opportunities and like put in work, as compared to like kind of the latter generations. They're used to being like, no, like this is what's fair and this is what's right and this is what's going to happen. And if this doesn't happen, then you're canceled or well, burn down your shop or, you know, whatever crazy people do these days. But it's interesting, kind of people's expectations now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh man, that's crazy. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah?
Dang.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. It's hard for us and it's hard for them. I think especially because we do have certain expectations. I think the Me Too movement is the biggest thing. It's like it has helped so many people because back in the boomers' time, they didn't get that opportunity. They just had to deal with it. They had to deal with the sexism and harassment. They had to deal with the actual like harm and rapes, to where now people are calling that out. I also think it's kind of harmful though, because there's still people who are like victims of the Me Too movement in a sense, because there's people who might not have done something, but now you can cancel somebody so quickly, you don't even think about what's right or wrong. I feel like back then it was more of like of an investigation. Now it's like once you're accused, and that's what happened. It's not the innocent until proven guilty anymore.
Yeah.
It's the you're guilty because society says you are, and because you should know that you're guilty. So I think that's hard.
No, for sure. And it's crazy because like you see things like, I mean, we talk about how different things are, like, you know, within 50 years, you know, but the 50 years prior to that, you know, people who are in the cuffs between, like, boomers and millennials, those people saw so many different types of like roles and like stereotypes and what was okay, in the workplace and stuff. So kind of playing off of that and then applying that to their life. What was okay, 50 years ago, people are trying to like resurface that, being like, hey, 50 years ago when you did that to me, but in that context, in that time, it's so different trying to pull that back up and trying to like hold people accountable and stuff. It gets really, really sticky because we have this perception of like, well, you still did this and that's still wrong no matter what the expectation was at the time. So you should still be held accountable. But there's not really any proof or, it kind of gets hard because we want to do the right thing, but it's almost like there's a timeline or there's like
it's hard because things was acceptable.
Yeah.
It's like, I think like Bill Cosby said it, but he was like, well, everyone was doing that back then. Because it's true. A lot of people were just like giving people drugs and like you might have known that's what you did. Like I think Harvey Weinstein, he was like, people just touch people. And is it right? No.
Yeah.
Were people probably victims? Yes. But the people who were okay with it at that time, because they may have been getting a benefit out of it, now they're saying, that wasn't right. To where at the time they were like, well, I mean, this is what I gotta do to get by. To where there were some people who were like, this isn't right at the time and lost jobs and were not the famous people you see today because they stood up against it then.
Yeah, exactly. And now that people have like benefited from those hard situations or making those choices, now they want to turn back and say, well, you shouldn't have put me in that position. It's like, well, who put who in that situation?
It's hard. You don't want to victim blame.
Yeah, it is hard.
Also, don't want to say, well, what about the people who stood up then and had no opportunity?
Yeah, who you don't hear of, or who had the one movie and then never got to be in anything else because they got blacklisted because they wouldn't.
And I think that's hard because they said no then, but if they were in our generation, they would have been famous for just saying no.
Yeah. Wow.
Dang, I never thought
about that. That's so crazy.
I think that's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a segue, but I mean, it kind of goes into like our next question. It says, the saying goes, history repeats itself. Do you feel like these generations are doomed to repeat the same mistakes of previous generations? Which I mean, I wouldn't say that like this whole like drugging and stuff like that, like this is going to happen again. But do you think like some of the same like political mistakes or stuff like that, you think this is bound to happen again?
I think nothing's new. I think everything is recycled. It's like fashion, mom jeans, everything are coming back now. Birkenstocks, what our parents wore back in the day.
Yeah.
I think all the stuff that is happening, it has happened before. We're just aware of it now. So I do think history repeats itself, and we just might not know it, but I think it's because we weren't aware of it. And now we have the knowledge to be aware of it. It's like, I think the politics and stuff, this has been happening forever. Look at Ronald Reagan. Look at other presidents. Like, this has been happening for a long time, but now we have the knowledge and the resources to do more about it. In 20 years, there's going to be some other reason why we don't want a person as president. There's going to be some person who was not allowed at this time to be president that will be then. We don't even know right now. We don't know what's going to be new in gender or sexual orientation or race. We don't know what's going to come up. We don't know how a person will identify in 20 years. So I think the same mistakes will repeat itself because there's always new things being created. And I think we just weren't aware of the things that were happening.
Do you think it's going to be at like the same severity though? Like,
no, I think it's not because things are handled a lot more quicker now. People are aware and people try to understand more. I think like racism, for example, a lot of people didn't try to understand where other people came from. Now you have people who are like, mental health's another thing. Like a lot of people didn't believe in mental health. A lot of people still don't. You hear all the time how people say suicide is selfish, to where it's like, who are you to say they should have dealt with their pain so you could be okay? And so I know me and my mom had a conversation about this because she used to think like, I mean, you just took yourself away from your family and like, what about your parents? What about your siblings? And I told her, I was like, well, Mom, like, they were suffering. So who are you to say you should have stayed suffering so I could be okay? And so I think that's the biggest thing. I think people are more aware and more willing to listen. And so I think problems will be handled a lot quicker and they won't be to the severity. But I think things always resurface.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, like you were saying, you can't bear someone else's pain. I think that mental health is like a big issue that I think a lot of people just really don't understand. They think at like some point, oh, you can just get better. Why don't you try and do that? But it's like, it's not that easy for some people.
They're like, why don't you just be happy? You're like, depression is not like that. It's like sometimes it's chemical imbalance. Sometimes you do everything you can and you just can't be happy. It's like, so I think people think that these people are choosing sometimes to be that way. And that's not always the case. It's like, for me, I want to work with criminals. Like, that's some of the most horrible people in the world to some people. And they are. Like, this is to say what they did was right, but they also did it for a reason. They're still somebody's child. They still were a victim at one point. They may still be a victim in the prison society and corrections. And so I feel like that you have to understand and you have to be willing to put yourself in another person's shoes. Not saying that these people who did wrong were right. It's not saying that every person who is depressed just isn't trying to do something to make themselves better. But it's also, you need to look at something from all sides and put yourself in another person's shoes, because just because it's convenient for us doesn't mean it's convenient for somebody else.
No, for sure. I think that things are kind of shifting away from this like very like black and white, like right and wrong type of like setup into this more of like, I mean, people are people. People make mistakes. Like, people go to jail. That doesn't mean that they're like a wrong person or this bad person, that they don't deserve like, you know, human contact or like niceness or like a good meal. You know what I mean? And like cleanliness. Like, it's. I think that with social media and like mass communication, as mass as it can get, you know, at this point, could we get more connected? I mean, we could, but like, it's crazy. I think that so many people are able to like share their stories and their perspectives, and you're able to really see like someone who couldn't be the more opposite of you. Y'all could be the most connected as far as like people go, you know, like mindsets. And I think that that's like just like super powerful and like moving, you know, and I think that in a way that will help history, you know, maybe not, I think that it's inevitable to repeat itself, but hopefully guide it into ways that are just gonna like making it better, you know, so that way the mistakes or the repeats aren't so, you know, catastrophic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay, well, thank you, Kimmy, so much for coming on here and just coming on here and doing.
We really appreciate you coming on. A lot of people have been not so time-centric, and sometimes they'll just quit on us, so we really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's okay. I had fun. You need me again, I'm willing. It's okay. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Sweet. Thank you so much, honestly. I loved your perspective. It was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's wrap up.
Yeah, I'm stuck to this chair. So that was episode 3, where we kind of dove into, politics without politics. I tried to be as
unbiased.
Yeah, because it's not, like I was saying, it's not so black and white anymore. You know, I think that there are just so much room for interpretation. Everything is so subjective or objective or, you know, whatever. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, there's some things that people can take in, and then like what they take in, sometimes it's not exactly the right thing, especially when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
But then even at that, I think it kind of just goes straight into social media too. You know what I'm saying? People take in social media in different ways, and some people, they use it as an outlet. Some people use it as like a way to promote themselves, and some people use it for really bad things.
Yeah, for sure. Someone who like uses Instagram as like to build their like online portfolio for photography, and then someone who's like, they can claim almost the same thing as like an Instagram model. Like, y'all are using Instagram for the same thing, but it's so different. And so
like human trafficking and violence.
No, exactly. It's just kind of funny to see people claim something, but how different their perspectives are in claiming things, you know, like as far as like socially, you know, like when someone says like, I'm a feminist. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? You know what I mean? Because my version of feminism is so different than yours, or whatever, or something like a Democrat or Republican. All of these things are so subjective now to, your personal, how like, you know, you define those things.
And I think a lot of things too, people just don't want to be put in one single box.
Yeah,
I want to be part of a lot of boxes, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that seems so limiting, and I think as this in-between generation, I think that like something like boxes and commitments and restraints are a little terrifying for us.
Yep.
As a whole. But other than that, I think that we knocked that one out of the park.
Thank you for watching Bitter and Basic, or listening. If you're listening to us, we really appreciate it. Shouts out to y'all.
Yes, follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat.
Well, we got
all of our social medias. I don't know. I'm just saying things.
We don't have a Snapchat yet.
Not a Snapchat. Never a Snapchat. Just Instagram. Bitter and Basic Podcast.
Peace.
We're out.
All right. What's up, guys? Thank you for listening. This is Alex.
And Katie.
Follow us on Instagram at Bitter and Basic Podcast. and on our YouTube channel.
Subscribe, like, comment, engage.
Thank you.